Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Cabarrus County Schools Board of Education work session for Monday, May the 6th, 2013. I'd like to call the meeting to order at this time, and I'd like for you, if everyone would join me in a moment of silence in memory of Coleman Lee Mitchell, a student that we lost within the last week, 10 days. And so if you would join me in a moment of silence, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here and joining me in that moment of silence there. It's always sad when we lose students. It's one thing losing a friend, family, that kind of thing, but when we lose a student, though, it touches us all. It affects the family. Okay, board members, we need to move right along with the agenda tonight, and the first thing that we need is, do I have a motion that we accept the agenda that is presented, the way it's presented?
So moved.
Mr. Harrison makes the motion. Mr. Kiger seconds the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, the motion is adopted that we accept the agenda as it's presented. Our first section tonight is the report section, and our first report will be coming from Ms. Kelly Klutz. It will be the QSCB financial update, and she'll be coming to the podium to give us this update. Thank you, Ms. Klutz.
Good evening. Again, we're toward the end of these projects, and so there's not much financial activity. Most of the things that have not been completed are encumbered, or we're waiting on a bid. I know there's a couple of these projects that Mr. Whitkey has out for bid right now, or will have out for bid in May, so that the work can be done in the summertime while the students are away. But if you have any specific questions, I'll certainly be glad to answer those.
Okay, board members, do you have any questions concerning the QSCB financial report? Okay, Ms. Klutz, you did an excellent job on that. There was no questions. Okay, and let's see, I think that we got Mr. Whitkey coming up for the status report on the QSCB projects. And so, Mr. Whitkey, if you'll take the podium, and you're there. So when you get ready, we're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Ms. Klutz indicated, we are winding things down, and starting at the top of the milestone report, the window and door project at Central Cabarrus High School has been, for all intents and purposes, completed. We went through and did a final check with the contractor, with the architect, and basically approved release of final payment for the work. So we are, ready to wrap that up, and we will be getting the closeout documents from the architect and contractor in the near future. The gym project at Northwest, the addition is going well. If you've been out there or gone by it, you'll see the masonry is having a hard time getting up, but they have poured the concrete floor for the addition. That work has been done, and it's steadily moving forward. The interior is moving along a little bit better. They've gotten all of the structure removed from underneath the old bleachers. Bleachers are removed, of course. They've now filled that, and they're ready to pour a floor in the existing gymnasium, and they're doing a lot of utilities work inside the building as well. And that is on time and moving well. The Coltrane Webb hood is ready to bid. It did come back with DPI's comments. The design firm is making modifications to the documents to address those comments, and we will go out to bid. I hope we can get that done so that we have something before you in the June meeting. The Mount Pleasant High School boiler replacement is the same way. That has not been sent to DPI yet. I believe it's going to be sent shortly, and we are reviewing those documents as well. So we're hopeful that we'll get it out. Again, it's the kind of work like the hood that really cannot be done while students and staff are in the building. So we'll wait till they leave, and we can begin that work this summer. The weight room and vocation building at Concord High School is out to bid currently. We will receive bids in 2 days, and on the 8th of May. Hopefully that will be good news, and we can bring that to you next week. And the practice fields are still on hold. We have asked the consultant to break down or give us rather sort of a menu of costs of things that we could do and certain phasing of the work, so that we will know once we've bid the roof at Jan Freeze the monies that are available and whether or not the board chooses to spend money on those fields is a question that we'll be asking the board in the next month. The electric vault upgrades at Cabarrus High School, Central Cabarrus, excuse me, are all intent complete. We are lacking some final information that I believe we just got today. So hopefully we'll get all of the paperwork done and be able to sign off on that for next month. The upgrades, the electrical panels, we're just waiting for some documents from Duke Energy. And as soon as we get those, we'll be 100% complete on that as well. As I mentioned earlier, the roof project at Jan Freeze, we do have some modifications that we're going to request the designer to make. Once he gets that done, we're hopeful that we can get it out to bid in the next couple of weeks so that we would take bids at the end of May and have that information available to you in June. And the other remaining projects are on a postponed status. Do you have any questions?
Okay, board members, do you have any question on the QSCB status update? Mr. Kiger? Okay, Mr. Phillips?
Yes, I had a question on the electrical update grades on Ms. Klutz's report. It's showing that for the Central Cabarrus High School, there's about $38,000 that's left, and I think you were indicating that that project is done now, so that will be money that we could allocate to a different project on this list.
No,
No.
and this is a unique case. Because we had so many problems with the contractor on that project, trying to get them to move along and to stay on schedule, and we've had some difficulties with subcontractors and material suppliers not being paid on time, we did contact the bonding or surety agent for that project, and that firm requested that we pay no additional monies until the project was complete. So I've informed the contractor that when we do get final billing, we will be submitting a request for a dual agency check from the county to pay so that the surety and the contractor's name will be on the check. And it's just, that's the way the surety wants it, and so we're just complying with their wishes. So that, in that unique case, it's the only project that we've had to do that way, but it is what we're doing. So that money is really committed. I'm sorry, are we talking windows and doors, or are you talking a different central?
The electric vault
I'm sorry.
code upgrades. Yeah.
You can tell where my mind was.
You're focused on the problem ones,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
No, that project, you're right, sir. We will have excess funds, and it will be available to move to other projects.
Right. Similarly, there's another line item that's for various schools breaker panels, and it's got 40,000 that it says has not been remaining balance, but the project's only 85% complete, but it sounded like you're saying now that it's those projects are also pretty much wrapped up.
Yes, sir.
Does it look like we'll have to dip into any of that 40,000?
There's a small change order on the design side. I believe, I don't want to quote it, it's less than $2,000. I think we'll approve that change order, but the remaining funds would be available. Sir.
Okay, any other questions on this side? Okay, Mr. Kiger, you had a question?
Yeah, I guess, thank you, Mr. Whitkey. Just for clarification, when we say funds are left over, they're going to the bottom of the list. They only can go to those postponed projects, is that right?
Unless the board chooses to create another project, and that is possible, but we have to go through the whole review process by DPI to achieve that. So.
Okay. I thought there was an original QSCB list, and that we have to work down that list, and any money we move stays on that list. Is that's not? Am I not correct on that?
It depends how the board chooses to go. I've had correspondence with DPI recently that suggested there might be some opportunity to change if we choose to. And
No, still with the April deadline of 14?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, definitely.
Do we have time to change? No, we do not. So in essence, these three projects at the bottom are where we're going with any money left over.
Right. The only
Okay.
place that I'm suggesting the money may have to go is to the JN Freeze roof, because we're finding out that we need to do more with that design than anticipated because of code. upgrades.
Okay.
And so.
And that's on the list.
That's
and
on the
you'll
list.
let us know as these things shake out, that's where you're going. And
Yes,
that's
sir.
perfectly fine. I just wanted to make sure I understood where we were going with that.
Right.
My question was I'm on the wrong page on my thing, but on my screen here, the Coltrane Web is not we've done several kitchen hood replacements. I believe that was code, that was a code revision and requirement that we've had to go back.
Yes.
I'm curious, I guess, if we submitted a code revision to DPI, what kind of comments did we get back? They can't override North Carolina Building Code. So and if you don't know off the top of your head, that's fine. Just maybe by next Monday. I'm just curious of what we would hear back from DPI on a kitchen hood replacement that's being done per, a code revision.
Yeah.
So,
Off the top of my head, it was more in terms of like how things were labeled. It was a lot of electrical comments, and it had to do with how the designer chose to do something, not necessarily that it was being done. And
okay, and so that's what the designer's in the process of
reflecting what
that.
DPI has asked
Was there,
for.
will be there a change in the scope of work, or is there any cost to us based on those comments?
Not to
Any
my knowledge
additional
yet.
cost?
I haven't heard that coming back from the consultant.
Okay, but we're getting ready to do the same thing with the boiler replacement. We'll send to DPI for comments?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, that's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kiger. Any other comments? Mr. Shoemaker, no comments?
Just a couple. Mr. Whitkey, on the Northwest High School HVAC addition that's associated with the gymnasium project, it's all coming out of similar monies, I guess. Have you gotten the equipment, and is it ready to go for installation as soon as the school is out? I know you
that
said it had been ordered.
Right. We had, if you will, pre-ordered it through Train, and I suspect it's still with Train, but it's ready for delivery. The work can't really be done. It's for the auditorium, and so, excuse me, that is right in the middle of the school, if you're familiar with the layout. And we really can't work on that until the end of school year. So, but matter of fact, I just happened to see the contractor this morning, and it's certainly on their list of things to talk about tomorrow at a meeting that they're having and getting ready to prepare to do that work. So,
But you don't foresee any problems with the delivery of the equipment on time?
No, not at all.
For that piece of it?
Right.
All right. Also, on the roof for Jay and Freeze, are we going to get any money back due to energy savings or anything on that?
Yes, we've been told that Duke Energy has an incentive program that we qualify for, and we should, if all things go well. And it depends a little bit on what we finally agree upon in terms of the level of insulation that we choose to go with. But that it's approximately $12,000 as it currently stands, as a coming back to the board.
Does that $12,000 end up coming back into the QSCB, or does it go into the general fund? How does that work?
That's a question I would think. Yeah. Let Kelly answer that.
So the energy savings will come back into our energy account, which is a local account, is not QSCB. And so that would be funds that we could redirect to teachers or student learning or classroom supplies, those type of things.
Good. I just wondered, since we might have this, whether we got it tied up with the QSCB and had to use it for that.
Because we literally pay the energy bill from local funds, and so that would be a reduction of what we're paying from local funds, not QSCB.
Thank you.
I will say what we have been doing with the previous rebates is putting those dollars back into energy conservation projects in our schools. In other words, if we had a saving, and we have had savings on several projects, not necessarily QSCB, but other projects that we do, those rebates are spent at that school for lighting replacements, other improvements that will save energy in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Whitkey.
You're welcome.
I have one quick follow-up. My curiosity now is going, but I promise this will be the only question. Have we ever had an instance where a comment from DPI that maybe we had to do something, and then we turn around and the local code enforcement officer who's enforcing North Carolina code has an issue with something we changed per the comments that we got from DPI?
Todd can probably answer that better, but I will say routinely DPI's comments are recommendations. They're not requirements, as I understand them, Todd. And so it is voluntary, if you will, on the owner's part, whether you comply with them or not. There have been those issues where our consultant has taken issue and said, we appreciate your comment, but we're not going to do it for these reasons. And I'm sure that there have been times when our code officials locally have disagreed. I can tell you when that happens, if we really think it's a serious issue, we will have a communication with all parties, just to make sure that everybody understands where we're going with it.
Okay, I guess ever is a long time if I phrase the, have we ever, probably, but I mean, I just didn't know if that's something that we routinely kind of fight or not, so, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Whitkey, for your report, and we're progressing right along. So it
Right,
won't be
thank
much
you.
longer. We get it all finished up.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, board members, we're going to move on to the 4.1. This is where we'll be talking, these 10 items that we'll be talking about here in the next few minutes will be up for either the action agenda for next Monday, May the 13th, or the consent agenda, where we'll vote on those all at one time. This first one is the athletic facilities. Got Miss Kelly Klutz coming to the podium. We've talked about this one time before, and so we're going to talk about it again tonight. Ms. Klutz?
Sorry. We're asking that you bring it back to the table and present it for discussion, and if there's questions or concerns, we'll certainly get the staff members that are involved to answer those. Hopefully you've had information in advance that can help you with those questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Klutz. We'll start with board questions on Mr. Shoemaker's side, and if you have your questions ready or you've got your questions answered, we'll come on down the line.
My questions have been answered, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Mr. Kiger?
Well, I guess I just want to make sure that I understand on the list that we got from Cox Mill, their initial thought is to help kickstart fundraising, but if for some reason we had a problem with that, they've got storage needs. I guess I read somewhere something like Hickory Ridge has got, but I mean their first thought is we think we could get this done, and this is what we'd like to jumpstart.
Right. They would like to start the field house process, going to kickstart it with that, and I have no problem with that. That's up to you guys. But in talking to their athletic director, Brian Knobb, they've already kind of spearheaded that campaign to get the ball rolling. And if it was going to be 10 years down the road, it'd be one thing. But I think they've really got a good plan in place to where they can make this happen in the near future.
They've already started the discussions on what it's going to take or how much, and I would assume they'd probably talk to some folks over at Robinson.
They certainly have. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Kiger. Mr. Walter?
Yeah, they've got a list of priorities. I mean, this is a breakdown from the list that we had 2 months ago? Is that what this is?
Right. From my understanding, they were, before I came on board, they were asked to come back and itemize it, shorten the list down to under $80,000, and now it was less than that now. And pretty much just looking at pretty much the necessities of what they didn't get when the school was built. As far as they got really nice schools, just some storage shortage and some multi-sport field house needs. So we came back and shortened the list there to their main priorities.
Just seems that several are looking for field houses.
Right, basically so, because the schools were constructed without those. And it's not just a football field house, it's for multi-sport too.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Mr. Harrison?
Yeah, please. How does this disbursement work? I mean, when the athletic organizations commit to spend the money in a certain way, do we get the invoice, and up to that amount we go ahead and approve those expenditures and then stop at the maximum amount allocated for those purposes?
That's a good question. We have a board policy that references that. Any contributions and donations that come into a non-nominal value have to come into my office. So if we had, X amount of dollars allocated from the school system, then the booster or whomever would donate the other dollars. That would come into my account. Once that total amount was available, we would issue a purchase order or a contract through the board, and then we would disperse it from my funds. My funds begin in my possession.
I like that attitude. Ownership. Is there a deadline on which these schools need to abide for the expenditure of these funds, or do they have, how long do they have before they need to commit these funds?
So that would be something that the board could decide. Ideally, we would like for it to be completed as quickly as possible, but when you're dealing with major construction, we understand that it is going to take some time, and we could carry those forward as long as the board agreed to that.
And I wouldn't necessarily want to make that proposal. It may apply in one school, but not apply to other schools, but they have some flexibility.
We do.
Do they have 6 months flexibility?
I can carry these funds over because it's a smaller amount of funds, so they would be obligated for that specific purpose if the board decided to allocate it for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Phillips, you have some comments, questions?
Okay, well, I guess this would be for you, Ms. Klutz. What's the source of these funds?
This would come from our fund balance.
Okay, and
Savings.
we acquired this fund balance because of our prudent spending and managed to save money on energy costs and other things, I assume. And
Yes, sir.
also, I understand we got a little bit less of a budget rescission from or whatever the term is, from the state.
Discretionary reversion.
Discretionary reversion,
Okay.
thank
Good
you.
job.
So this is essentially unexpected cash that we have. And I think we need to be careful how we spend it, and not just, go for the things that are nice to have, but I think we have a lot of things that we need to have in this district, and we need to make sure we spend those. But one of the things that we do have to take care of is the health and safety of the student athletes and the people that come to watch them. And so I'm wondering, on this list, are there specific projects that relate to health and safety of either the student athletes themselves or the people that come to visit or watch them participate in activities?
Well, specifically like the Mount Pleasant track, it's the only rubberized track in the county, and it is in dire need of some repairs on that. So that's a safety issue there, and could be well spent for that. Also, the schools are going into 3 different conferences next year. So Mount Pleasant will not be in the South Piedmont anymore. And they have also expressed that they would allow our other South Piedmont Conference schools to come to Mount Pleasant to participate in their track meets, since we're the only Mount Pleasant's the only rubberized track. But it needs to be fixed. And this is monies that can be used for that gate monies will not cover these types of things. And so where that's going to come from otherwise, without some additional help like this, I don't know.
Especially for relatively small projects, do we try our best to spend as locally as we can?
You better
Let me
answer
address
that.
that.
I mean, I know about bidding requirements.
Certainly as best as we can, although we do have board policy that we have to abide by. So if it's a certain level, you have to take the lowest responsible bidder. So within the law, we do, but there are certain stipulations that we have to abide by with the law.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Any other questions from the board? I must tell you that I spoke with Ms. Carpenter last week, and she asked me specifically that this go to the action agenda for Monday, and so it will need to go to the action agenda for Monday night's meeting. And just my comments for whatever it's worth, I see that we reduced this from $80,000 down to $57,000, which totals $287,000 for the 5 high schools. And I know that there's needs out there, and I'm sort of like Mr. Phillips. There's so many other needs out there, and it's hard to not do something for the athletics, but then it's hard not to do something for these other schools that come and tell us of the things that they need to get fixed, and the funding is just not there. And with this money being available to us, I think one of the discussions that we had when we put the committee together to talk about these excess funds, that we would try to put this money in the classroom, make it more operational, and not do things that would require capital funding, that type thing. And I believe, Ms. Klutz, you remember us talking about that. We wanted to try to put this money in the classroom, and then these needs for the athletics sort of just, they've been there, but they popped up to the board at that time. When the money became available, these things popped up, And I'm not saying that they don't need to be done, because I'm sure they do need to be done. And the Cabarrus County Schools spends a lot of money on athletics as it is. You know, when we build the football fields and the ball fields and all of those type things, it's millions upon millions and millions of dollars. And but anyway, that's here and there. That's just my little 2 cents worth on it. But I think that there probably does need to be some type of a provision given. I'm not going to say it's going to be $57,000, but I think there need to be some type of provision given to the athletics, and then whatever portion is left over could be distributed for some of these other needs that we have within the district. And that's just my little 2 cents worth. But anyway, we'll move this to the action agenda for May the 13th, and then at that time the board will vote it up or vote it down or compromise or something so that we can move on with this issue. I thank you both for the report, and thank you for being here. Coach, good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks again, Ms. Klutz. All right, board members, we're going to move right along with our agenda, and this next item here is the policy revisions. We've got Dr. Colleen Sane. She'll be with us for 4.2 and 4.3. The first one is the policy revisions on the first reading, and the second one will be on the second reading. So, Dr. Sane, when you're ready, we're ready.
I'm only bringing to you 2 brand new policies this week. I know we've had a plethora of policies to come through. The first one, selection of instructional textbooks, actually materials. We are in our system and across the state and across the nation, moving away from what we used to believe was the foundation of learning, which was the textbook. It was sacred. If it was in the textbook, it must be true. But the reality is, in this age of technology, in the age of that things are changing so quickly, it's unrealistic to imagine that you could have an accurate social studies textbook, for example, that would last you 5 to 10 years. It's just it doesn't make sense. Things change too quickly in the world. And it's important that we give our children accurate information. So this policy takes the textbook as the main source of education away as required. Still can use the textbook. There are good uses for textbooks, don't get me wrong. But it also, textbooks can limit a teacher's ability to instruct. They need to be able to bring in a variety of instructional materials. So this particular policy, again, catches us up with practice, with what we're already doing. It gives you the objectives for selection. That hasn't changed. Process and criteria really hasn't changed. It's the focus, I think, that's changed the most. And the fact that it used to be we wanted our educational materials to support, but now we want them to be aligned to our curriculum goals and instructional goals. And you can see here that we have made a number of small changes, but the thrust of this is the change in attitude, if you will, from a child must carry one textbook for every single content area that they take. Any questions about 3200?
Mr. Kiger.
Go ahead. Well, first, I'm going to want this on action because there's a document that I now have, but I hadn't been able to read. So, and that is that it specifically states that the board supports the principles of intellectual freedom expressed in the American Library Association Library Bill of Rights. Well, I don't know what that document says, and so before I vote for something that says I support it, I want to read the document.
Sure.
So I don't know. I'll have to read it. But other than that,
No problem.
the premise of what we're doing, everything has totally changed. We do not have a book anymore. So if that's what the goal is and that's what the policy is doing, then that's fine. I just want to read that document before I vote on the
Did you
policy.
not get your email, did you? We did have it out today. I think you got it out to us, didn't you?
I couldn't read anything.
I did.
Okay, because I know that I did read that email on the Library Bill of Rights. Okay.
I saw that I got it, I just couldn't read it.
Yeah, it was later
Let's
this afternoon, I think.
Yeah, okay. Let's start on Mr. Phillips' side. You got questions?
I just have a minor thing. I'm completely supportive of the move from just citing textbooks to talking about instructional media in the broad category. That's fine. But at the bottom of page 2, in 2.0,
Yes.
there's some text that's removed about, actually, it's the final line, about the committee that will select these will be appointed by the principal and will include appropriate personnel representing various subject areas and grade levels. Fine. But then I noticed that it has deleted "and parents," and students should also be involved when feasible. I'm just wondering, what's the source, the philosophy change there?
I think we have such a variety of materials that we utilize. Our main source materials are approved by curriculum instruction after they go through a pretty rigorous test to align with curriculum and support curriculum. I think that in the past, when we chose one text to represent all of learning, the process was possible to allow lots of people to have input. At this point, every parent has a right, if they see that there's a piece of instructional material that they find that is not, that is objectionable to them, they have the right to say, no, I don't want you to use this. We have the responsibility to provide that child with an alternate assignment. But at this point, I think that to go back and form that committee and have such a wide variety for every single piece of instructional material that we use, it would be difficult. And so you can pull a small group together in a more timely fashion than you can a large group. You can make decisions in a more timely fashion.
Okay, that's reason. I mean, once every 10-year adoption of a textbook is a lot different than, do we use this YouTube video to describe what the cycles of summer, spring, and fall are? Okay.
Right.
Just off the top of my head, I may vote against this. Haven't been waiting for this day for a year or more, but one of the most appalling things I ever saw in a textbook was an English textbook, a section on poetry, and one of the poets in that book was Mao Zedong. Now, I don't need to lecture anybody in here on who Mao Zedong was in 20th century history. Mm-hmm. He was one of the worst mass murderers known to mankind. And while I can't comprehend why some textbooks include material that is like that. But I do want to review this policy as closely as I can.
Sure.
And just a quick review of the Library Bill of Rights looks like it is fine and dandy for public libraries, mm-hmm. but I'm not sure if its breadth and scope is appropriate for, in effect, children's libraries. So I'll just stop at that point, but I, of course, need to read it much more closely.
The source of this policy originally was when the library was the only source of supplemental material, okay? So you think back 20 years ago, you didn't have all the magazines, you didn't have all the news feeds, you didn't have everything you have today, and the only source of supplemental materials to the textbook could be found in the library. And so that's why there's such a close association and why the language is in there about the American Library Association.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Walter.
Okay, that's in our policy now as it is, right?
Right.
So we're already referring to it. In the current policy, we're already using that standard.
Yes.
You've answered most of my questions. Just a review on how do we inform parents to see if they now have an objection of if it's electronic material and not.
They have a responsibility once it's assigned to come in and say, for example, an English teacher, to use your example, will give a list of the 4 or 5 or 6 novels that they're going to read. The parent has a chance to review that list. Kids take it home and they have an opportunity to come in and speak about it.
Okay, well, that's that's books, but when it's an electronic
Right.
media now, how do we disseminate that somehow?
Typically not in advance to parents. We don't, there are things that become available in a quick fashion that at the beginning of the semester you may not have realized that this was a good resource, but towards the middle of the semester another social studies teacher brings it to your attention, or your principal brings it to your attention, and you think, yes, this might be a good use. If a parent sees it come home and they don't like that, it's very simple. We'll offer an alternate assignment. It's not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Mr. Kiger, do you have any further comments? Mr. Shoemaker?
Dr. Sain, I'm in the same section as Mr. Phillips was, or Dr. Phillips was, on who will, and it says who will form an appropriate committee. And my concern is whatever your appropriate committee is that there's a groupthink that goes on with an appropriate committee because they all kind of come from the same type of background. You know, we are besieged by ideas. Not necessarily are they factual ideas, but there are lots of ideas and philosophies that are running rampant. The biggest thing is making sure that our children get exposure to several different sides of an argument.
Absolutely.
And not one side is picked over another side or is excluded over another side. And that's kind of where, especially when you get into the social studies world where facts are more flexible, I guess is a better word to use.
Interpretation of facts.
Yes, there's
yeah.
lots of interpretation and there's lots of philosophy that runs underneath the strains there. And so I'm concerned about this because this appropriate committee has a tremendous amount of power and flexibility to do what it wants to do, and that Dr. Shepard, under his guidance, that you guys make sure that you're really airing and asking questions on both sides of the philosophical issues that are going on, because I'm truly concerned about how we approach education, and we're not excluding certain types of thought, or certain
Right.
types of thought are demonized because it's not, certain groups aren't espousing them, so therefore someone who thinks this thought is not thought of in a very high way, and yet that thought is a very valid thought, and maybe it's not getting the kind of exposure it needs to get because
Right.
certain people don't agree with that thinking. And I'm trying to be very vague and not, but I'm beating around the bush, but
Right.
I'm trying to be as politically correct in the way I'm stating this. But I am concerned about this. So, Dr. Shepard, that's really in your court, and I think this board needs to kind of be updated as to how you're implementing this, because with electronic media, you're interjecting the whole world into it, and there's a diverse philosophies and information going on out there that could truly give our students one way of thinking, and I want them to be free thinkers, and the only way they can be free thinkers is exposed to several different sides of an argument and making sure that they can argue all sides equally. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Marika, as a teacher liaison, what's your thoughts on this in the classroom?
Well, I was just thinking with the new Common Core, that's what we're teaching our kids to do, is think rather than just take one side. They really have to explore all possibilities and see the different sides of various issues. And it's amazing, if you walk into a classroom, you're going to start seeing kids doing that. So we're already kind of doing that, which is great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think what you'll find is our curriculum, our Common Core curriculum, and Jason may want to add something or not, I don't know, but it requires us to not take one side or the other. It requires us to present children with multiple opportunities to see how someone else might view that fact or the interpretation of that fact. The other thing it requires us to do, and Kelly, I know, has spoken about this before, is we have a responsibility to teach our children what is fact and what is opinion, and to help them understand that everything they read on the internet is not necessarily the truth, that there has to be facts behind that to whatever is being said to support that in order to be the truth. And I think that one of the things that I worry about is that my 23-year-old thinks that, if it's on the internet, it must be true. it's like 25 years ago. If it was in the paper, it must be true, And the reality is we all need to teach and to learn that help children understand and practice that you take all of that information with a fairly skeptical eye and you take a look at it and say, what are the facts behind it? What are you thinking? And that's the whole point of this new Common Core curriculum. Would you agree?
That was a good example, Dr. Singh. Thank you very much. And Mariko, it was nice to hear from you from the classroom perspective. So what I'm hearing is that this will need to go to the action agenda for May the 13th. Do we want that, or do we want it to go back to the policy committee for any further revisions? Back to the committee, Dr. Singh?
Okay, I'm not sure what I'm revising
And
here.
that's what I'm wanting to.
I'm sorry.
I'm wanting to find out.
I didn't hear anything to revise.
Well, on Mr. Phillips' side, was there anything that you wanted us to change? You were talking about the committee. The
No,
appointment of the committee
after
selection.
hearing the explanation as to why the change is made, I'm fine with that
Okay.
particular deletion.
Okay, well, that sounds like it's settled then. So we'll go straight to the action agenda for the
Okay.
13th. And that was because Mr. Kiger, he wants to read up on the library Bill of Rights. Am I right?
Right.
When he gets that all settled, we'll just do a vote, and that'll be real quick next week.
Got it.
Okay? All right, now we can move on to the
second
the next one, right.
It's kind of scary that we do not have a policy describing what physical standards are required of bus drivers. Bus drivers, lots of people apply for bus drivers. You would be amazed. People who can't necessarily get up and down the aisle, people who don't have the strength or the stamina to get up and down the steps. And when we go to discipline these people, or we go to say, I'm sorry, but you're really not qualified to be a bus driver, we don't have anything that's backing us up. So what we have here is a policy that was actually brought to us from transportation and has been rewritten by Mark Enriquez, looking at visual acuity, field of vision, depth perception as far as vision, the ability to scan roadways and mirrors, the ability to communicate with passengers, the ability to use good judgment, and to react quickly. And I think what we're not going to measure is their judgment, but their ability to react quickly and to get to the exit doors as quickly as we need to in an emergency. In the case of the Charlotte fire of the bus several years ago, it takes seconds, and our bus drivers have to be able to get children off the bus in seconds. So it's not a question of can you do it eventually. It has to be done quickly. Drivers must be able to maintain control of the bus and the passengers under adverse circumstances, and I think that's important too. And they must be able to complete practice drills. And we do have several evacuation practice drills once every semester at the beginning of the semester to help students remember how to get off the bus should you need to get off the bus. And we've developed a test. It's based on the development of possible state test, but it allows us to work with bus drivers and say, no, you have to be able to accomplish these things in order to safely drive our children on our buses. Any questions?
Shoemaker.
I really, excuse me, I applaud you for this policy. I do have some questions as far as its implementation. And,
Sure.
And in it, it talks about the driver's ability to necessitate the dragging or carrying of passengers. Are you going to, because you said that they do evacuations on the buses.
We do
once a semester,
evacuation drills.
but you're adding a next level of training on your bus drivers.
Right.
And you had in here that you had some PT requirements for them to.
Right.
Physical requirements that you required out of them.
And
so
as
will you
we-
give them some techniques as
Yes.
well to use in removing people from a bus? 'Cause you would
Absolutely.
assume that's probably where this dragging and carrying would be. And will you arm them with a tool that can help them in that process, like a strap of some sort that can help pull people or whatever? But, I think that you need to engage the bus drivers in this and then see, okay, as they do these tasks, what tools could possibly be useful, or just to be sitting up in the front with them and they get into a situation and need to react. But they need to know how to utilize the bus to do their work, and I see this as very valuable.
And I think
the biggest thing is
I'm sorry. I think as we work towards implementation of this policy and development of the strategies to implement this policy, all of those things must be taken into consideration. And I'm going to leave that behind for my coworker, Chris Louder, to handle that part of it. I'm sure he's taking notes.
And Dr. Shane, one thing, it's in the policy, but in case the board members didn't see it, it's going to be, most of our policies are immediately effective. For this, it's immediately effective for new candidates, so we'll put new candidates through testing. Our current bus drivers have until July 2014, so they'll have a year to review the standards, get ready, maybe they need to get in better condition or do something else to meet those. So it's not an immediate thing. We wanted to give our folks an opportunity to see the standards and do the test, so they'll have a year to get up to standards is how it's currently proposed. We had some discussion in policy committee about how to do that and how long was reasonable, but that's the draft we bring you as a 1-year period.
And I don't know if it really is appropriate to put it in the standard, but there should be some underlying guideline as to how frequently, you give them some updated refresher training, because it's just like CPR or any other type of rescue technique. You want them to be able to arise to the occasion and be very thoughtful in how they're approaching it, rather than reacting with not a plan in mind.
Exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Any further comments?
I was just going to say, we have, and Mr. Thompson's helped draft a pretty extensive administrative regulation that actually covers items like retesting, and it's a very good, I think, detailed, step-by-step, this is how we'll do this test, and this is how we'll measure it, and this is the timing. We talked about whether to put all that in the policy. My advice was let's not put every step of every test, because it'll change over time. So the test is broad, but I do want you to know there's a multi-page administrative regulation that actually details the actual testing that'll be done. But that can be updated from time to time without coming back to the board.
Okay, any other further questions from the board? Mr. Harrison?
I'd just like to hear from Mr. Thompson as to his disposition about the policy.
Thank you. Just some brief comments that this policy was derived from the North Carolina Pupil Transportation Association, a statewide association of directors and other transportation personnel, the North Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles Safety, Traffic Safety Division, which is responsible for training the bus drivers, and the Department of Public Instruction and Transportation section. They're all in favor of this. We drafted our version from their version, and they're hoping to get it passed as a state requirement. But with the change in politics that we had back last fall, it was sidelined for a while, so now they're going back through the process, basically starting all over again. But I felt that it was so important that we have something in place to cover us, that's what I brought to the policy committee, and I'm pleased that they brought it before y'all, and I'm hoping you'll look at this and pass this, because it's very important for the safety not only of the children, but also of our drivers. With the situation that happened back last spring in Charlotte, there was less than 2 minutes to evacuate that bus. We've got drivers now across the state that wouldn't have made it. How many of the children wouldn't have made it? So we've got to do something, and this is a very good start. And I'm in full support of this, and be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Board members, any other further questions? Mr. Walden?
No, I'm also on the committee, and you've done a good job in putting all this together. There's 12 pages of steps and some good thoughts from the board as well, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thompson. Thank you, Dr. Sane. We'll move this right on to the, consent agenda. Okay, consent? Okay, all right, good to go. Dr. Sane, your policy's on second reading.
Okay. Policy revisions on second read, I took the suggestions that you made last month and incorporated them into the new policies, and I will take questions.
Okay, board members, I won't be redundant with what Dr. Sain has said. Has everybody had time to read the policies? Are they okay with them on the second reading? Are we okay for the consent agenda for the 13th? Okay. Dr. Sain, it's like you got your part there finished.
Thank you.
All right, well, we'll move right on. Matter of fact, you're going to be right up next, so we just keep you there since we're going to do the calendar.
All
I
right.
think that's right. Revise the academic calendar, and so we'll start with that.
This has been an interesting journey. There's a fine line that you walk in creating a calendar between making sure that you have the instructional days that you need and the instructional time that you need and the time to train staff. I think it would be irresponsible of Cabarrus County Schools to attempt to implement a brand new curriculum, whether it's from the state or anywhere, without training the staff and giving them the support that they need to do it. And as you well know, in any job, the first time someone showed you how to ride a bicycle, you rode okay, but you also fell several times. And so someone else came out and gave you some more pointers. And you read better that time, but you still may have fallen once or at least wavered or wiggled on it. It's only after you've ridden that bicycle and someone gives you the kind of feedback that you need to hone your skill in riding a bicycle that you become a good bicyclist. And so what you're going to see new in here this year is you're going to see 3 half-days added that were originally for elementary only. And now they're for all students. And there's 2 reasons for doing this. One is that will be system staff development on Common Core as we continue to hone the skills of our staff. The second reason, and probably not nearly as glamorous a reason, is quite frankly, when we let out elementary on those days and don't let anybody else, it cost us about $5,000 extra a day to run those buses. So I hope those are 2 very compelling reasons for you to say, yeah, those 3 half-days will be fine. Just so you know, if we do that, take the calendar as it is, high school will have 1,050 hours of instructional time. Middle schools will have 65 hours, and high schools will have, elementary schools will have 1,080 hours. That is above the required 1,025 hours that we need to have, so we're not in danger of that. The other thing you're going to see is there are 2 cap days, November 5th and May 6th. Those are election days, and those are capped for staff development. In the past 2 years, we were required to use 5 staff development days for instruction. With this calendar, teachers have the opportunity during annual leave days to take annual leave or to take any earned comp time they had for providing service to the school above and beyond what our normal working time is. I believe those are, the last changes on here are, you'll see the identification of possible inclement weather days. We started not to put those on there, and then it occurred to me, I remembered that while we were getting such a buzz about having to make up a snow day, someone reminded Dr. Shepard that we actually had that snow day identified on the calendar and that they didn't know what all the buzz was about. So I think in order to give families the opportunity to plan accordingly, that you know that you don't book your long trip non-refundable tickets on possible snow days. And the fact that we really haven't had a good snow in North Carolina or in our area makes me believe that in the next couple of years it will be our turn. It's wise of us to go ahead and identify snow days, possible inclement makeup days. The the last thing I'd like to tell you is that the superintendent always has the authority to designate a Saturday. We don't have to designate those. So if, for example, it snowed on Monday, and we had time to turn around and get that made up that particular Saturday, he has the responsibility or the privilege of doing that.
And because the rule changing to 1,025 or 100 or this will be the first year where I think, given the facts and figures you've given us tonight, that we could choose whether or not to actually make up a day. Am I correct in that?
Right.
The numbers you gave us exceeded 1,025 hours. So I know a number of families that have moved from up north have often said to us, why don't you build in snow days? Well, we've never had that luxury in North Carolina, but if we saw it would be to our benefit to do so, we would have that choice next year.
Thank you, Dr. Shepard. Board members, do you have questions about the academic calendar? Let's start with Mr. Shoemaker's side.
Just one question. On the inclement weather makeup days, Dr. Shepard, I guess it would really be to Dr. Shepard because it would be ultimately his responsibility. Is your policy or your process to allocate all the days and then go to the spring break? Because, again, Dr. Sain brought up, a lot of people do invest money in trips. Well, the spring break is the most eligible for the trip.
I'll let Dr. Shepard say it, but my practice has always been to protect spring break at all costs.
Yes, I totally. That's what we've tried to do over the last few years, is make sure we keep that week intact. And that's why we've used Saturdays, protecting that week instead. And that's not the most popular decision, but I do believe it's one that has worked well for us in most cases.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dr. Shepard. Any other comments from the board? Mr. Kiger?
Well, I was just going to say that this to me is classic of somewhere down the road, something will seem goofy and somebody will stop you in the grocery store and say, what were y'all thinking? But today, looking at it, it makes perfect sense. So, it looks fine to me.
Thank you, Mr. Kiger. Mr.
Yes,
Walter.
sir.
Yeah, I have a couple issues, and again, I think it's good thought process. The two things that I have a problem with are the designating of the Good Friday as a makeup day. I would rather you take that off.
Okay.
And then there's one, I guess, an election day that's designated as a possible makeup day if we're mixing the public with students. I don't think that's a good idea either.
That's the spring election date.
It's still an election day. There's some of our facilities are used for polling places.
True.
So I don't think that's a great idea to identify that day as a makeup day either. I see that we did add an extra day to the calendar year if necessary. That's okay. And again, if you're a high school student, that's pretty good news in June. You get 1, 2, 3, 4 days or half days now. So I'm
That's
sure
right.
they'll be pleased with that. So those are my comments.
I'll be glad to make that change on April the 18th. I'm going to ask that you allow me to keep the 6th because it's the last resort and it wouldn't be used unless we had no other choice. And then add the 23rd as a possible make-up snow day. I feel very strongly that we need 5 or 6 make-up days identified in our pocket. We may not use them. We haven't used them in the past, but I'm concerned about having fewer than that. So I'll do whatever the board wishes on that.
Thank you, Dr. Sain. That sounds like that might be a better plan to me.
Okay.
The 23rd, take the 18th off. That's where I'm at. Mr. Harrison.
And if I understood you correctly, I mean, I believe I'm in agreement with Mr. Walter. There wouldn't be any circumstance that we should have children at a school when voters are at that same school on election day.
Okay.
I can't think that that's ever going to be a good mix, even potentially. We have?
I think
I would feel like it was fairly awkward.
Yeah, we're pretty unusual, I think, in our county that we do utilize our schools so much. And I would never, ever think of using the November election day as a possible makeup day. Mm-hmm. But the May election is usually not well attended, I'm sorry to say, and it's easy to contain that election. Which the Board of Elections is very, very protective of, they have to have a separate entrance, they have to be separate and away from students. I mean, it's very protective of that. However, if that's what you wish, I'll be glad to do it.
Well, I have seen that, for example, at Harrisburg Middle, the election is held, I guess, in their cafeteria. That facility would be used to some extent, wouldn't it, on a make-up day, at least for breakfast?
Right, we had breakfast and lunch. We'd have to put it in a different place.
It sounds like it could become awkward, even remotely, but
Yeah.
thank you. Appreciate all your work.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Harrison. Mr. Phillips?
2 questions. First, define what a capped day is for
Okay.
staff.
A cap day for staff means that you may not take annual leave on that day.
May not.
You
Okay.
may not
Okay.
take annual leave on that day. Now, if you wake up with appendicitis on that day, we're still going to pay you for that day. But you may not take personal annual leave on those days. You may not request it.
And so the change is that now these first 2 days of the school year in August, or the staff school year, are going to be capped, whereas in the past they were not. Is that a change?
No, we always cap the first 2 days. The schools request us to cap the first day of school so they can have their teacher meeting back and have everyone there to hear that. And then we, as a system, cap one more day so that we can take care of all the necessary changes. For example, this coming year, one of the things that we have to do is we have to arrange and organize our Power School training and our new web training. Okay. And so to try to do that and to not protect a day and say, okay, we can get everybody on this day would be disastrous. So we've always capped 2 days at the beginning of the year. Last year, we capped additional days that included Fridays and that sort of thing. This year, we don't have to.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
My second question is that this isn't one of the proposed changes, but I just noticed that the graduation dates are scheduled for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and I thought the previous board made a decision that you wanted graduations on weekends and not on weekday nights. Has that changed?
I think the last decision that the board made, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Shue, is that they didn't want graduation to hang out over the weekend. And so while they're not really crazy with the fact that this coming year we have a graduation on Sunday, they prefer to back it up Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and get that taken care of. So, Mr. Shue, am I remembering correctly?
You're remembering the same way I am.
Okay.
You know, we didn't really want to do the Sunday deal, but there really wasn't much way out of it.
Right. So what we try to do is take the schools that can get their materials and information and grades accumulated the fastest and start with them. So we would have PLC, for example, on one night, and then we would begin with another 2 high schools and then begin the next day and try to run them through as quickly as possible. The unique thing about Cabarrus County Schools is that we hold all of our graduations in the Events and Arena Center, and they roll pretty smoothly, and they are equally as special. They have the same decorations. The school can add some more, but there's some consistency to what happens during that. And I think parents now appreciate that. And so in order to get those graduations in, we have to run them on the Thursday and Friday.
So those potentially could be during the day, particularly on Friday.
Yes.
So,
yes.
All right.
And parents know a long time in advance about what time their graduation is.
Okay.
So they're good with that.
I thought I remembered complaints from last year when graduations were held on a weekday during the day, and that therefore there was a decision made that this year all the graduations are either in the evening or they're on a weekend.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I got to tell you, that's kind of my recollection too, but I don't know. I heard Chairman Shue say that his recollection is a little bit different, so I could be I could be wrong.
Until this year, the Thursday is where PLC has always run. That's the one where we don't have as many students, so getting the grades is not done. What they have always been when it fell on a weekend was they ran all day on Friday and they ran all day on Saturday to avoid Sunday. This past year, when we got into this whole situation, it was because the school year ended and there was a 2-day break or so, so the plan was to have graduations on like a Wednesday in the middle of the week. So the complaints came from people not being able to travel in and have a weekend to be able to do their graduation. At least that was my understanding of it. So prior to this one, it's not so much about getting it in the weekend because we probably had more complaints about Sunday than we did anything else. It was people that are coming out of state want to have a weekend, and when we had kids sitting idle for 5 days till we got to the next weekend, that was where the complaints were, to not have it in the middle of the week, if that makes sense.
And as I've said many times in the past, as a board member, we have learned, and you as staff members have learned, that we're not going to please everybody when it comes to graduations, because we got people coming from all over the country, from even out of the country, and everybody's schedule's just not the same. So we have to set a time and designate days, that type thing, and we're hoping that everybody that wants to can come. And as you said, Dr. Sane, the event center is a wonderful place, and after attending many of these over the last number of years, they go like clockwork. They're very smooth, and for you new board members, you're going to have an experience of a lifetime. All thing I can tell you is wear good shoes. Wear good shoes.
What we've usually done when that fell was the first one to run about noon on that Friday, so you would have as little missing of work and stuff as you could. So 3 ran on Friday and 4 ran on Saturday of the traditional, and then there hasn't been a problem to run the PLC that evening on a Thursday because it was a smaller group of kids.
Y'all are going to allocate and budget for cots for us to take a nap in the back in between sessions, aren't you? I'm not sure if that'll make it to the budget or not.
We'll give you a lunch, David.
I'll take what I get.
Okay, let's move along. Let's see, Mr. Kiger, you have any comments?
Well, I think we just need to resolve what to do with that primary election day, because I think Dr. Sane's going to need some direction on it. And I think, it's my opinion, I don't think we should hamstring Dr. Shepard as if disaster strikes and we're pushing days and trying to figure them out, where we would have pulled that day off and we lose a day of spring break. I'd much rather gamble that we're not going to have to hit election day, especially it's a day that by and large is usually about a 20% turnout or less than a spring break day. So I understand your concerns. It's not ideal, but I in my opinion, I just don't think we should hamstring Dr. Shepard with the calendar by pulling that day off.
Thank you, Mr. Kiger. I agree. I think that what I'm hearing so far is the only changes that I'm seeing is the 18th come off, 23rd going on, and I'm with Mr. Kiger on May 6th. Mr. Shoemaker, we hadn't heard from you, so what's your thoughts on the academic calendar?
Well, I'm pretty much along the same lines as you guys are. Keep the 23rd, move the 18th to the 23rd. And as far as May 6th, I think that's I think there's already a process in place to deal with voting on that date. And though I understand that if we were to have a robust turnout, that we might be challenged in a little ways larger than what we expect, but I think it's really the Board of Elections that's going to be challenged and not really us per se. So.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Okay, board members, let's look at this now. I would assume, based on what we're talking about, we'll move this on to the consent agenda with that specified change. Is that right? To the consent agenda, everybody? Okay. Dr. Sane, that's where we'll go, consent agenda. Thank you very much for all the time and effort you put into the calendar. It's a challenge every year, I'll tell you. I think we've had more challenges with the calendar this year than I've had in past years for various reasons. Okay, we're going to move on to 4.5, and we'll have Mr. Shoemaker, our own board member, is going to tell us a little bit about what he knows on this resolution that we're being asked to sign. This resolution is to construct a separate grade crossing at the Wynkoff School Road and Mount Olivet Road. And Mr. Shoemaker, when you get ready, you can tell us how this is going to go.
Well, this is a request that's coming from the Kannapolis City Council. And looking at the widening of Interstate 85 that's beyond Highway 73 moving north towards the Dale Earnhardt exit. They're looking at widening it. Actually, it'll go higher than that. I think it goes up to 63. But in that widening, one of the things that they'll be doing is removing a bridge at Ridge Avenue. And if you go down Interstate 85, because many of you probably have never been on Ridge or cross that bridge, if you go down Interstate 85, you'll notice that there's a bridge that you come to right after exit 55, and that's the Winecoff School Bridge. Then you come across another bridge, that's your 29A bridge or Main Street Bridge in Kannapolis. The next bridge is the Railroad Bridge, and then there's one right after it, and that's the Ridge Avenue Bridge, and they're proposing to take that bridge out. And then right after that bridge, you come up to highway to exit 58. They're talking about removing that, and one of the arguments about removing it is to create a separate crossing. Currently, Winecoff School Road intersects with 29A, and then there's a very strange railroad crossing that is fairly dangerous. What the Kannapolis City Council has proposed is that there would be a bridge that would connect Winecoff School Road to Mount Olivet Road, which would then carry across and give us and they're going to do some improvements. Kannapolis City wants to do some improvements on Mount Olivet Road, which would then carry all the way up to Highway 3, Branchview, Center Grove, the road over there in Kannapolis near Royal Oaks Apartments and the backside of Walmart. But that would improve that area, and that would give them a parallel course for local traffic to keep the local traffic off the interstate, and that's part of the main proposal. It appears in the last meeting that I was at with the city council folks in Kannapolis that DOT seems to be embracing this, so our resolution will just continue to reinforce our commitment and the I think the ability of this bridge to help our transportation issues in the county, because I believe it'll help us with the schools and in transporting our children around. So.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Board members, if you have questions in reference to this resolution, we would want to direct those to Mr. Shoemaker, since he is our liaison for the city of Kannapolis. And so if you have questions, we'll start on Mr. Phillips' side, and if we don't, we'll just move right on and go to the consent agenda.
Well, I wish I had a really tough question to ask you. But I don't. The only thing I was waiting, do our school buses currently use that railroad crossing?
Timothy, yes. Timothy can answer that one directly.
Okay, so yes, I definitely would be anything that can allow us to have an overpass over railroad tracks is definitely a move in the right direction.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Harrison, you have comments?
Barry, could you come to Harrisburg and work on a similar resolution in that vicinity concerning the railroad tracks in the Harrisburg area? But great work. We appreciate your partnership with Kannapolis and being a great liaison with that group.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Walden.
I'm also very supportive of the idea. Is there a drawing or something that shows that? Because those two roads are over 1,000 feet apart. Here he is.
I have a drawing that I will pass around. I appreciate it. I sent you a copy about a month ago of a hard copy of a electronic copy of the drawing.
I did receive that, but I couldn't make it out for whatever reason. Mr. Walter, are you finished with your questions? Okay, Mr. Kiger, you have any questions? Okay, all right, board members. I think it was pretty clear. We're going to move this on to the consent agenda. Am I correct? Mm-hmm. Anytime we can support the city of Kannapolis in an endeavor like this, where it's going to make things better for them and for us, then we need to always let the state know where we stand. So I think we just right on to the consent agenda on this item. Okay, with that being said, we're going to move right along, and this is 4.6, I believe we're coming up to, and Mr. Wiki will come to the podium, and he's going to talk with us about this agreement between Mogeson Mitigation. And so Mr. Wiki and I talked earlier this afternoon, and I hope you got some answers to some of those questions. Mr. Wiki, it's up to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This same project was brought before the Board of Commissioners this afternoon, so I was the beneficiary of that conversation and found it very interesting. What preceded me in my time in this position was an involvement with the organization that was called the Eco Enhancement Program. It was a state program which our Soil and Water Conservation District typically was involved with when they went and did some of these set-asides, if you will, these mitigation programs. And one that was referenced in the Board of Commissioners meeting was the program behind Harris Road and Odell school sites. Those were apparently handled through this process. Currently, the Eco Enhancement Program is not able and is not authorized to conduct these agreements any longer. And so the state has recommended that counties work with individual consulting firms like Mogensen to, in effect, create a program by which these easements are utilized as part of a relationship where there will be a firm that has need for whatever reason they are doing something either in their operation or in terms of what they're developing. They need to provide mitigation in some fashion. And I'm not an expert in this area, and I apologize for that. But the idea is that they could come then to a consulting firm like Mogensen, who holds properties and is able to say, okay, we will provide you with the mitigation procedure. We'll create, in this case, a restoration of the stream on our previously land provided by the school district, and it will not cost the county and the school district any funds. The only concern that was really voiced was there going to be a situation by which later Mogensen would come back to the county or to the school district and say, we need cost sharing by you to take care of this problem. And that is clearly not part of their agreement. It is their responsibility to make good on the mitigation work that is involved with this property. There are lots of questions that the Board of Commissioners had. They tabled this until more information is available. One of the key issues that was raised by one of the county staff was that he wasn't certain that this particular agreement took into account the construction of the Raging Ridge Road Bridge that is being planned right now. And the person who was speaking for Mogensen was also not aware of that project. So basically, it's sort of tabled at this point. They're going to go back and talk about it further. Dennis Testerman was there. He will be working with Mogensen and having more information brought back to the county. What I'm hoping is that by next week we would get some of the answers to these questions for for this board's meeting. I don't know that will be the case, and I'll do what I can to get more information to you. How soon it will be produced, I can't say.
Thank you, Mr. Wiki. As we talked earlier, I feel like there's definitely a lot of unanswered questions because we didn't have a lot of material. I, for one, wanted to know sort of what the relationship was between Mogensen mitigation and the county or Cabarrus County Soil and Water, what the relationship is. If the party that's requiring the mitigation, the improvements, restructuring of the creek, is it down the creek somewhere? Then they say, well, you fix the creek, we'll put an industry here, or we'll do this or do that. Who's paying for it? Where's the profit? Why do they have to own the land? Then what happens after that? And then with the personnel that's working on the particular project coming on to the school grounds, what are they doing to protect our kids from having their personnel on our school property? And there were just so many unanswered questions there. And so as far as I'm concerned, it'll have to go to the action agenda on Monday.
Yes,
hopefully between now and then you'll be able to get us some more information about these items that are of concern. But I want to hear from the board and how the board can add some more questions that we need to try to get answers to.
That's fine.
And another thing too, which was one of the first things that come into my mind, even though the property is in the Cabarrus County Schools Board of Education's property's name, but if we give it away, sell it, or anything like that, the county commissioners always has first right of refusal. And so if we say, well, we're going to give this land, which what the proposal is, $1 an acre for the Mogensen mitigation, and the county says, no, we don't want to do that, well, they can surely override us because they have that first right of refusal. So, but anyway, let's hear what the board has to say, and we'll start on Mr. Phillips' side.
Okay, well, I agree with what you said. The one thing I'm a little confused about is that it talks about that we're going to grant them a conservation easement, but then later on it says the price to be paid for the cost of this option or purchase agreement will be $1. So it almost makes it sound like they're buying the property. I think there needs to be a clarification there that they are not buying this property. They're just buying the right to go in and do the conservation mitigation. Because otherwise, you're right. If they are buying the titles to that strip of land, then it's got to go to the commissioners. We can't just do that.
Just so you know, Mr. Phillips, this is before the commissioners. That's what I was saying.
Okay.
The same agreement is before them
Okay.
at this time. So whatever they're going to say about it will be discussed in the next 2 weeks. So.
The other thing is that whether it's an outright sale or it's just an easement, under the MMI responsibilities number 6, it says MMI is responsible for all monitoring and any required maintenance within the conservation easement until the project is officially closed by all regulatory agencies, typically 5 to 7 years. Okay. Then what? It needs to specify what happens when the project is closed. I think what I would want to happen is everything reverts back to the school district, whether it's the ownership of the land or it's the easement is closed out and we just take that easement away from them. But I mean, the general concept, I assume, is this is a what do they call it? It's kind of an offset thing where it's somebody's doing a project somewhere else. They're going to have to infringe on a wetland. So to compensate for that, they're going to rehabilitate an equal amount of wetland somewhere else. We happen to have some wetlands that need to be rehabilitated.
Yep.
If somebody else will do that for us at no cost, that's a pretty good deal.
Thank you. One thing I would point out, could you bring back the plan that Mr. Walter was kind enough to share this plan with us. The blue line designates, I believe, roughly, well, not entirely. The blue line begins to designate the area along the river where our property exists, but it continues on along this area as well. And the total area involved, or I thought I heard them say it was approximately a mile in length. So it's on both sides of the creek. I said river, but it's a creek, and it's not just school property; it's private owners as well. Just so you all understand that.
Okay, Mr. Phillips, you have your questions answered. Okay, Mr. Harrison, you have any questions?
And I'm not making this comment because I happen to live off of Stallings Road, but if you look at a topographical map, our two high schools, and I know that's the primary purpose of our consideration of this proposal because of our property that we need to be good stewards of and work out so that we maintain the use and effectiveness of the school property. But I've always felt that and I mean this for countywide, not just again my little backyard, that the construction and the pavement of those two high schools contributes when there are very heavy rains or hurricanes that come through to the stormwater runoff that goes down the creek near Middleton Circle of Harrisburg, outside of Harrisburg. And again, I'm not trying to just talk about myself, but I mean thinking more long-term and how our school construction affects the water runoff. Don't let me confuse things here, but are we talking about stormwater runoff somehow, or how are we?
No, I mean, in reality, based on DNR's requirements, we meet the stormwater runoff retention on site. So and you can go into a whole philosophical discussion about whether that's adequate or not, but we do, by letter of the law, by what the code requirements are, we do handle all our stormwater runoff as required by code. So the issue is really, if living there, a lot of the land that surrounds these schools is underwater in high water times.
That's for sure. That is
The
absolutely for sure.
That practice fields on Hickory Ridge Middle are underwater at times. When that happens, the erosion of the banks occurs. All this type of work does is establish bank.
Building a berm.
Well, it could be riprap, it could be grass, it could be a number of different things. It's to basically hold the soil in place. That's all that they're really talking about here. It's nothing exotic, to my knowledge. It is pretty straightforward land retention and stabilization. That's what they're talking about.
Okay.
Because there's nothing the bridge is going to do to that. It's going to remain the same. The flow of water, as if you've heard the engineers talk about that for quite some time, the flow of water will be identical to what it is today. They're not improving it. They're not making it worse. It'll remain exactly as it is. And the level of the water on these lands will continue.
I think as we manage our property that belongs to the county, we should also do the best we can to ensure the value and the livability of the neighborhoods surrounding our properties.
Absolutely. Yep.
Long term. Thank you.
You're right.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Walter?
Chairman Hsu, I think you answered a lot of my questions. Was there plans here now to put a bridge, from Raging Ridge Road to Stallings Road? Is that the plan?
That is correct, yes.
And when was that supposed to occur?
Well, ideally, very shortly. Matter of fact, I didn't get a chance to stay for the whole agenda, but I believe that was on the board's agenda today, was kind of an update and next steps with contracting, taking the project to bid. I believe construction was supposed to start this year, but I don't have dates for you at this point.
Okay, well, I wouldn't want this to restrict that as well. You've really covered most of mine. But our property line basically is the creek. Is that what it looks like on the map?
Yes, it's kind of the middle.
So it doesn't cover the other half of the creek. So the point of this thing is to keep this property as wetlands permanently. It doesn't have any bearing on the other side if somebody wants to develop something. So
right.
It just seems odd if you've got to take both sides of the creek if you're going to do a project such as this one. But
well, we're one of 8 property owners they're talking to, and I believe the other property owners, a number of them are on the other side.
I don't think they're looking for $1. That's whatever. No. Anyway.
I think we're on the same page, Mr. Walter.
You've covered my questions.
Thank you very much. I had another comment on the Raging Ridge Road that we're talking about. That's been going on for about 2 years now, I think. But I believe it is coming to a peak.
Yes.
It's ready to get started whenever little final details get worked out. But it seems to me like, just one more brief comment, and that is, it seems to me like since the commission has, if it is actually a sale, then since they have the first right of refusal, I felt like that it probably should have come from the commission, to start with. That's my thoughts, because they got to make the decision anyway. Why would we make a decision on something that they got to make the decision on first to start with? But anyway, that's fine. We'll deal with it best we can. And Mr. Kiger, you have your comments.
No, he did it. I just wanted to make sure we were covered for building the bridge in the future. As long as somebody has brought that up, then I know that we're looking after that.
Absolutely. And Mr. Shoemaker, you have a comment.
Yeah, just as your information, Dennis Testerman would probably be an expert on this particular Cabarrus soil and water. So if any of you really wanted to talk to him more about that, I would get with him, because he's been doing this throughout the county, setting up these conservation districts, and they're not anything new. And many farmers have signed on, and it's really just to protect the floodlands. And I don't know if this is going to be incorporated into the Carolina Thread Mill Trail. It looks like the Rocky River part is down there in the bottom corner there, but it could be a part of that as well. So,
thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. So what I will suggest is that we just move it on to the action agenda for the 13th. And between now and then, you'll hopefully have some more information for us, and then the board can look at it, and then we'll vote on it. And like I said a while ago, if the commission, they tabled it or whatever, and then I don't know what we're going to say is going to really matter, be honest with you. But we'll deal with it next week. Okay?
That's fine. I was going to suggest, Mr. Chairman, that it may be that this board wants to take action on the basis of what, or at least advise the county commissioners.
Contingent upon what they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we'd have to pretty much follow suit anyway, because they're going to have the ultimate say-so.
Yes, sir.
All right, that's good. And so, Mr. Wickie, we'll move on to 4.7.
Thank you.
And you can go ahead and talk to us about the bids for construction of the Concord High School weight room.
Yes, sir. That project, as I mentioned earlier this evening, is bidding in 2 days, on the 8th. And so we will bring to you next Monday evening the results of that bidding. We hope successful bidding of it so that we can move forward with the project. The work is ready to start as soon as we can get the contractor in place. So we left the blanks appropriately in the request. We'll fill those in for you for next Monday evening and hopefully have good news for you at that time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wickie. On the 8th is when you'll be getting the bids. That's on Wednesday.
Yes, sir.
And I'm assuming you'll get those out to us in the Friday report, so that way the board will have time to review the bids, and look at the calculations and all of that. And then we'll move this to the action agenda, so when all this stuff comes in, we'll fill in the blanks and vote on it and move on. Is that okay with the board to do it that way?
Very good.
Yeah, because, I mean, you can't question something you don't know. We don't know at this point who the bidders are and who the lower bidder is going to be and any of that stuff, so it'll have to be action.
Sounds
Okay.
great.
All
Thank
right.
you.
And let's see, I think you've got one more here. Let's see, 4.7, you've got 4.8, and this is also the construction documents, and so we'll go ahead and move on to 4.8.
Right, yes, sir. This relates to the one-time funding from the county to add cameras at 4 schools and, 4 high schools and the Glenn Center. And so we are in the process, we've solicited, if you will, per the discussion we had earlier in the year with the board, we have solicited we've requested responses from 5 firms that we feel are capable and have the ability to do this work. I know as of this afternoon when I left the office, we had 3 in. I don't know if we got all 5 in at the close of the day. I wasn't here when that happened. But we will be meeting on Friday, the subcommittee the liaison committee members, Dr. Shepard and myself and my staff, to review these and hopefully decipher and make a recommendation to the board next Monday on which firm we would recommend to do this work.
Okay, Mr. Wickie, I appreciate your comments on this. Board members, do you have any questions on this particular item, 4.8? If we do, we'll start on Mr. Shoemaker's side. And if you don't have comments, we'll wait till we get the information in. And obviously, same as we were on 4.7, we don't have the information, so we have to go to the action. Am I seeing that right? Any other comments on this end? Questions? This is money that we've already allocated the money. The funds is allocated.
Yes, sir.
So that part's taken care of. We just don't know who the bidder, the winning bid is. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Harrison.
Not specific to this necessarily, but I keep wondering about the tennis courts at Concord High School that we've talked about pretty extensively a few months ago, and I just haven't heard a great deal since then. Maybe not now, but in the very near future. Can you give us an update, please, about the status of that?
I can tell you that it has been bid. It was successfully bid, and we're in the process of writing a contract with that contract.
So that high school is going to get some tennis courts real soon?
Yes, sir. We also bid.
That's real good.
Yes, sir. We also bid Mount Pleasant at the same time, and that unfortunately came in overbid. We are looking at some alternatives that we can possibly take and reduce the cost of that work to see if we can't get that within the budgetary constraints we're working in. So we hope to have more information on that shortly.
Mr. Phillips, you have any comments or questions? Okay, board members, Mr. Wickie, we'll move it on to the action agenda. Looks like we're going to have a lot of stuff to do next Monday.
Yes,
so
sir.
all dependent upon information that you obtain for us, and you get that stuff to us during the week. We come in on Monday, there shouldn't be many questions.
Okay. I was just going to point out that this is not a construction bid. It's for selecting a design firm to do the bid documents.
Exactly. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, that takes care of that. All right, so Mr. Water, do you have another question?
So the full budget was about 900,000.
So somewhere thereabouts.
Just the planning is
Right. Okay, let's see. Now we got 4.9, and this is Ms. Auger, and she's there, she's ready. And this is the approval or the adoption of a plan for reduction in force, okay?
Good evening. Tonight, I'll be presenting to you the framework for a reduction in force with the potential to affect teacher assistants and behavior management technicians, also called BMTs. Consideration of a reduction in force is never easy because of the valuable contributions our teacher assistants and BMTs make to student safety and achievement. Therefore, when the district must respond to potential budget cuts or a reorganization affecting personnel, it's essential that the plan be designed in a way which sensitively and clearly outlines the process to be followed. The criteria and how that criteria will be applied within the plan will be presented to you this evening. The district currently has 236 K-3 teacher assistant positions. In some instances, multiple teacher assistant positions have been converted to teacher positions. Therefore, we have about 204 active K-3 teacher assistants at this time. With the potential budget cut proposed by Governor McCrory, the impact to Cabarrus County schools would be $2.3 million, or about 94 positions. At this time, the Senate and House have not filed their versions of the budget for 2013-14. Our Exceptional Children Department is currently reorganizing the delivery of certain services for the 2013-14 school year, as well as potentially being impacted by reductions from sequestration. After job shadowing and carefully reviewing the current duties of BMTs, the roles are being redefined to become more targeted and proactive, focused exclusively on exceptional students, and will be managed by an EC behavior team. BMTs will cover more than one school and will work with referred students on specific strategies. With efficiencies from the reorganization, thus also putting us in a position to respond to the potential sequestration, there will be a reduction of approximately half of the 21 BMTs. The criteria for the reduction in force for teacher assistants uses the same point factor system created 2 years ago when we had significant budget reductions. The criteria include performance as measured by the teacher assistant evaluation, points for seniority, which is continuous employment within the district, leadership within the class, school, and district, and no disciplinary action within the last 2 years. The formula is applied within each elementary school based on the updated teacher assistant allotment, and the formula is applied to all of the assistants within the school who are evaluated on the teacher assistant evaluation tool. With the change to district deployment of BMTs and a change in their expectations, both the individual school and the central office are playing critical roles in implementing the point factor system for BMTs. The factors within the BMT point factor system include performance, as measured by the BMT evaluation system, an interview with the central office team, which will also include a personnel folder review, and again, district seniority. During the month of May, we'll watch for additional budgetary information from the state and conduct the interviews with our behavior management technicians. Approximately the end of May, our principals or central office staff would personally meet with TAs or BMTs who would be impacted by the reduction in force and would provide written notice. We're already holding open bus driver positions as alternate employment possibilities, as many of our teacher assistants do hold CDLs, and we're beginning to redeploy personnel into other positions as principals see an opportunity and if the person requests it. While employment's not guaranteed, a positive work experience will be favorably reviewed in regard to any employment application. In regards to benefits, the state provides up to 1 year of health insurance in the event of a reduction in force, and we would be holding a meeting to communicate with employees who are affected regarding other community resources available to them. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Alger. This seems to be the hot topic these days, you know.
Yes, sir.
And as I was interviewed today by Channel 9, they have an interest in this as well. And so board members, now's your time to express your feelings and your questions and concerns to Ms. Auger about the reduction in force for potentially TAs. Only question that I had, we're potentially going to lose maybe 94, maybe to 100. Does that include, does that total the BMTs is in that number?
Approximately 94 teacher assistants, probably around 10 or so BMTs.
Okay, but the 94 does include they're separate though, but they're separate.
They're separate.
Okay, all right, so we're looking at possibly 104 positions totally
Yes, sir.
lost.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
that answers my question. Okay, Mr. Phillips, you have any questions?
Well, I guess first it's just a clarification. What we're voting for on this plan is not to lay people off. It's the criteria that would be used if we have to lay people off. Am I interpreting that correctly?
We are voting on the criteria that would be used if we need to lay people off. However, we are in May, and if we're to inform people adequately before the end of the year and to have time to meet with them to talk about various options, there is certainly that possibility of needing to act by around the end of May on the structure that's set up.
But just maybe play out the timeline for me.
Yes, sir.
When do we anticipate knowing whether we're going to have the money from the state to continue to employ 204 TAs?
That really is the question that I think all of us wish that we could get an answer to. We had originally heard that it might be around the middle of June. We've now heard that the Senate and the House are not necessarily in agreement on what they're looking at right now, and we're hearing dates as late as the end of July or much later into the summer.
Man. So I know the state legislature loves to micromanage public schools, but they need to give us a little bit more leeway than the end of July if they really want us to run school systems. They
Yes,
need to
sir.
make up their minds before then. And I hope they make up their minds in favor of keeping TAs as they are. But I think, and this isn't a question for you because you don't control the budget, but I think we need to talk about a plan B in case this lack of funding comes through, to say, okay, I don't see where we're going to carve $2.3 million out of our operating budget to say, okay, we're not going to do this so we can preserve those positions. But I think we at least need to have a discussion to say, well, okay, because we didn't consider this during the budget committee. Right. This was not one of the things where we said, oh yeah, well, we're going to cut these TAs because we want to preserve these things. We just assumed we were going to keep all the TAs, so it never came up. So I think we at least need to have a discussion between now and the final budget approval at the end of June to say, all right, knowing what we know now, is there something we would have done, we should do differently in the operating budget? So I'll just put that out there. I think that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Harrison.
I hate these moments when we get to stand up here and pontificate about how things are out of our control. But this is a lesson in state funding, and Raleigh will make its decision in its own good time, unfortunately leaving us in the lurch to react as opposed to planning for the future. And that is the way it is. But in this case, matters are out of our hands. I would like to, in the case of the teacher's assistants, I would like to publicly commend Ms. Wishon for her recent letter to state legislators, speaking for a whole bunch of TAs. I'm sure they echo her sentiments. But that same letter that was sent to state legislators should be duplicated by about 203 other TAs in the county alone, to let your voices be heard. And apparently you have just a bit more time to do so, yet the state legislature is going to take until July to make these decisions. They may not take that long. those letters matter and should be read and heard. I would strongly encourage people to exercise your free speech and your desire to affect the decisions of our legislators. How many bus drivers do we need? Seems like an unrelated question, but Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry, is gone. But if we have some new policies concerning new hires for bus drivers, how many approximately do you think we need in terms of being able to accommodate people who are currently in TA positions? Or is that a fair question at this point?
I would like to have Mr. Thompson respond to that formally if he was here. I can tell you that several weeks ago we did ask them to freeze any permanent bus driver positions and to only bring on anyone else who was brought on from now till the end of the year as subs so that we would have the maximum number of positions. I believe in regards to the physical examination of current bus drivers, I believe it goes into effect immediately July 1 for new ones, but there is a transition period for people who are current bus drivers.
Do we, in a budgetary sense, do we reimburse individuals for the cost of a bus driver's license?
I don't believe we do, although I'm not certain whether the individual school may.
Well, I'm just
I can
trying to
certainly
think ahead
research
to
that
their,
and
to their,
bring that back to you.
the best actions they could take for the time being would be to have some auxiliary skill, such as bus driving, that would help them remain in the system.
I can tell you, our teacher assistant position used to be combined with bus driving, as many of you know, before it went to the 3-tier. While a few bus drivers or teacher assistants have in fact let their CDLs go, many of them have kept them active because we do use our teacher assistants to drive for field trips so that they can actually be with their students and in a lot of other situations. I've also talked with Timothy about possibly trying to reserve spots for people who don't have CDLs as we have openings come for training during the summer.
Well, if we could put a price tag on passion for children, the teacher's assistants would be up there, and I respect their energy and their passion for what they do for children, and I do wish that could translate to higher powers that be that make these final financial decisions that affect the counties. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Walter.
For the BMT, it's a behavior management technician,
Yes, sir.
and it's only the middle and high schools that are affected here? Is that right?
That's where the BMTs are assigned.
That's where they are right now?
Mhm.
Can I go over again, what is our restructuring again? I guess you can just go over that paragraph.
Jason Van Hukelen's going to come up and discuss that.
So this is unrelated to the TA and the budget of the governor. Right. So this is in response to the reorganization of the EC department and kind of a return on investment analysis of that particular program. So every single middle school and high school in the county has a non-certified position similar to a TA, but it's called a behavior management technician. And their purpose is to manage the behavior of students. And they're specifically supposed to be working with special ed children. And so we kind of did an audit of their work and audit of what they do and how we spend that money, and took a look at the total budget, some of the things we want to work on, and want to reduce that force by half.
It said something here about not complying with federal guidelines or something.
Yeah, so you got three major drivers of this. Number one is analyzing their intended use versus their actual use. So we did a 2-week time study. We also did random audits and things like that. So when you use federal money for special education, it has to be used 100% of the time with special education students. And so in that finding, much of the time of the BMTs was not spent with special ed students. They were used for other purposes as well. So regardless of whether we were going to reduce and force, we were going to have to redefine that role, because that was found to be not in compliance with what we would expect from special ed money. Does that answer your question there?
Yes.
Okay.
back to the teacher assistants. For if we're assigning them as a bus driver, how many hours do bus drivers typically have compared to a teacher assistant?
Typically, that would be pretty similar. Most of our teacher assistants are 30 hours now, and that was a result of budget cuts that we had 2 years ago. And most of our bus driver positions are also 30 hours. 30 hours is also the cutoff in the number of hours required to receive health insurance and to participate in the retirement system.
Is the pay rate, is that comparable, or is it different?
I mean, they would be fairly comparable. I don't think that would necessarily be a disadvantage to them to make that change now.
And those that have let them lapse, is there any way we can have a training class or something to help them to get those CDLs back for the ones that don't have them? I mean, I realize he's holding some positions for those that do have them.
I'm certain that we would do everything we could to assist teacher assistants if they had let it lapse and wanted to get it back.
It's a difficult position.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I know several teacher assistants, and they're attached to these kids, and they've made a difference, at least in the lives of my kids, on the elementary school level. So it's just a tough position we're in. But those were my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Mr. Kiger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Auger, as we've said and my fellow board members said, this is not something that we want to do. It's not something we look forward to do. I think, though, that we would be remiss if we put our head in the sand and kind of hoped it didn't happen, and then when something does happen, we're sort of scrambling around and not knowing what to do. So we've at least identified sort of how we may progress, and we hope that we don't have to do this. But at the end of the day, I do remember going through this 2 years ago where we de-emphasized seniority and we put a more emphasis on the quality of the instruction of the job performance. And I think that is, and we've kept that here, and I think that's the right way to go. Again, I hope we don't have to do this, but as far as what you've outlined of how we're going to go about, if in fact we do have to do that, then I'm fine with what you've presented.
Thank you, Mr. Kiger. Mr. Shoemaker.
I just have several questions. This was the first time that I'd actually seen how you actually implemented the RIF process, so I'll just have some questions around that and some of your dates as well. You noted in the presentation that the scoring would be on a per-school basis rather than a district-wide. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So each school would be grading or comparing its TAs to this scoring process, and then they would be retained or riffed according to their evaluation and all the other criteria associated with that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is your date? When do you need to? Well, I guess subsequent to that question, each TA is on a 10-month contract. Is that right? And so every TA is on a contract on a yearly basis. Is that correct?
Technically, teacher assistants are at-will employees. However, generally, there's a reasonable assurance of continuation of employment if we don't inform them.
All right. When you say at-will, are they on a 10-month yearly renewable contract? Is that how that works?
Unlike teachers, they do not have a specific contract by which they're governed. And under state law, they are what is termed to be an at-will employee because they aren't governed by a specific contract. However, they are 10 months. We generally renew them, and they have what's termed reasonable assurance of returning to the school district unless we inform them otherwise. So if we don't tell them anything, they have reasonable assurance of returning if we don't at some point inform them.
All right. So now that goes to the date as of June 30th. You will have to have informed the individuals that will be returning as well as those who will not be returning. And those who will not be returning, you have to inform them of the possibility that they may not return, or will you inform them that they will not be returning even though the state hadn't made its decision? The state legislature and the governor haven't made the official sign-offs of whatever they're going to do.
Okay. That really is an excellent question. It's one that we've been discussing at length. In order to be able to meet with them personally, to give them fair warning, to be able to have a meeting with all of the other resources in, we're looking at informing people toward the end of May based on the best knowledge that we have available from what we can see happening as to, yes, you are assured of employment for next year to the extent that we know it, or no, we do not foresee employment next year. Then obviously the board could act once we get a definite budget to make a different decision, or the board could choose to handle this in a different way, which I just described to you.
All right, so the notifications will go out at the end of this month, beginning of next month, and during that process. Now, if the state goes against what the governor has proposed, then this board would have to approve telling those who got RIF that they do have jobs back, or whatever that smaller number might be, or larger number, or whatever that is.
If that's the process that we follow, yes.
Okay. I want to just personally say that my wife was a TA, and I know the amount of help that she gave to children and the impact that she made on their lives. I truly feel that this is a very important issue for us and for our children, and I encourage each of you, because I've gotten Ms. Fitzwater's letter as well as Ms. Wishon's letter, and I know their heartfelt desire to see our children continue to be ministered to in the way that y'all do in the classroom, and I really applaud you for that. And I know what my wife did for 10 years. Also, she made a huge difference in children's lives. But we need to get with our legislators. We have 3 of them in our area, Mr. Pittman and Ms. Johnson and Mr. Ford, and then we have our Senator Hartzell, so we need to contact them and let them know how we feel about this issue and what we feel about it. There is a price to pay, and if we do the layoff here and have to go with this RIF, these folks will end up going on to unemployment. So there will not be all these costs removed, because there will be costs that will be added back in, and the federal government will be involved with that as well. And who knows what the other pieces are that go with that as well. So I think everyone up here is fully cognizant of that. We're unfortunately don't have the capability of making the full decision until we're told what we're able to make. But we will be contacting our local legislators and letting them know how we stand on this. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. And just one final thought, and then we'll have to take a break for the cameramen to change their disc, and that is my thoughts. And I think that the folks in Raleigh, all they'd have to do is just go visit some of these classrooms with K-3 and spend about a half hour in those classrooms, and and they could see really what all takes place and how much instructional time these TAs give to their students and the helping hands that's there. I can see 4th, 5th grade on up, no problem. Their kids are up, and they by that time know how they're supposed to do. But I personally, 22, 23 elementary kids, K3, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, I surely wouldn't want to do that by myself. And so my hat's off to the TAs that do it, and the part that you play in the children's education, setting the foundation that's going to give them something to grow on. And one of the last things that we don't need to add to the unemployment lines in Cabarrus County or in North Carolina, and with this being one of 115 school districts, you can just imagine how many people this is affecting in the state of North Carolina. But anyway, with that being said, board members, we need to make a decision on this. Do we want to put this on the action agenda for next week, or we want to put it on the consent agenda? And the way that I see it, it's something that has to be done, so I'm assuming it'd have to go on the consent agenda. Do I have everybody's okay on that? Okay, it'll go to the consent agenda, Ms. Auger. Thank you for bringing this to us, and we hope that we don't have to use it, but if we do, it'll be in place. Okay, with that being said, we need to take about 30 seconds or less for the cameramen to change their disc, and when you get ready, let me know.